Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Anthony Wade. It is April 19th, and the other shoe has dropped on Dr. Michael Brown's investigation from Firefly, the same organization that did the Bicklegate investigation. I must say that I've reviewed the report by scanning through it, so I haven't digested all of it per se. It does appear to be less detailed than the IOP report. The IOP report had a lot of detail about the specifics of the types of relationships that Mike Bickle was engaged in, and not as much charismaniacal code speak. Plus, it detailed, the other staff persons at IHOP, the 16 other people who also sexually abused women during the course of Mike Bickle's reign. For a reminder, Dr. Brown is credibly accused by two different women. One of the women is since passed away, so it's her husband that is essentially making the accusations. They're very different stories. The husband was married to this woman at the time that Michael Brown engaged in the inappropriate relationship with her. And she was in her 40s and he was in his 40s, so there was no age problem. The obvious problem is that he was married and she was married. And from previous reporting, the accusation essentially is that they developed a very progressively unhealthy, inappropriate relationship. And I struggle to define it because the report doesn't actually do a better job of defining what it is. They use the same type of verbiage. So an inappropriate relationship doesn't really tell you much other than they were doing something that they should not have done. Previous reports included that the husband essentially confronted Dr. Brown as to whether he was engaging in phone sex with his wife. That is not addressed in this report from what I can see. It is kind of left out there as this kind of generalized inappropriate tag. And possibly just because the woman has passed away. And, maybe Firefly didn't feel the need to darken her reputation any more now that she's passed, because clearly they were both adults. So the difference, of course, is that Michael Brown was in a position of spiritual authority, which is what makes it abusive. The other woman at the time was 19. Dr. Brown was in his 40s, and she was a former student of his, and then she stayed on when she graduated to work for him. This relationship dynamic was initially described by both as kind of like a father-daughter. And then Dr. Brown seems to have engaged in typical type of grooming activities, starting with small kisses on her forehead, and then graduating to kisses on her cheek, and then graduating to kisses on her lips, and playfully swatting her behind as she walked away and things like that. And you may say to yourself, what's the big deal? Because nothing ever apparently went beyond that. But the reason it didn't go beyond that is she stopped it. Is that she started to be uncomfortable with the progression, with the grooming, and she stopped and eventually left. So, it's a little disingenuous to suggest that Dr. Brown should somehow get credit for engaging in a generally inappropriate relationship with somebody half his age while he was a married man. And the other point that compounds this, that is always compounded, is Dr. Brown built his entire ministry empire upon this period of time in his life when he was considered a rabid holiness teacher. So as he was imposing these kind of restrictions on his students and his staff, he was doing the opposite. Now, the report does indicate that there does not appear to be anything since then Somebody like Mike Bickle, basically, even though his horrific acts were when he was younger, continued throughout the entire 5 decades to go ahead and basically abuse, I think it was 17 or 19 different women. The Firefly report reveals that they have found no evidence that anything outside of these incidences at this time, which was like 98 to 2002, I think, or something like that, that nothing else really shows up in the timeline after that. So it does appear that possibly Dr. Brown, having escaped accountability for these incidences, went on to not engage in any future similar behavior. Credit that if you will. I think that it's apparent, and this doesn't give me any joy or pleasure as somebody who once respected Dr. Brown, and I've been on this radio show twice. But this disqualifies him from ministry. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The Bible's very clear. He was actually disqualified 25 years ago. And it's taken this long for what he kept in the darkness to come to light. And he's, he built a very impressive empire within the charismatical sphere. This also kind of reveals some of the other problems that a lot of us had with Dr. Brown over the years, being a gatekeeper for the NAR, being a gatekeeper for false teachers. Dr. Brown is the one who, in the infamous American Gospel Roundtable, said that defended Mike Bickle to the hilt, only to find out several months later all the allegations. And even then, he went down to IHOP and he gave us a sermon where he basically reprimanded those who were listening to stay off of social media and basically provide cover for Dr. Brown. I'm sorry, for Mike Bickle. He's referred to Rabbi Zacharias after the revelations of what he did as a great holiness teacher. He's the one who, in the American Gospel Roundtable, defended people like Kevin Zadai, and Jesus playing the saxophone at the end of his bed, and he had Jennifer LeClaire on his show to defend the sneaky squid spirit. And I'm not saying it's all connected, but some of it I think is. When you've built your ministry upon something is essentially false, I think you tend to defend falseness as opposed to being, a diehard purist, if you will. So, do with that what you may. So the what we're going to read is the report from the Roy's report, who once again is on the front line, doing really good work in terms of exposing false teachers. And we'll get into a little bit of the report itself. So, Messianic apologist Michael Brown engaged in sexually abusive misconduct with one young woman and an inappropriate relationship with a second married woman in the early 2000s, a third-party investigative report by Firefly has found. The sexual misconduct included physical touch with Sarah Monk, a then 20-year-old woman who worked for Brown. The Firefly investigative report stated Brown also appeared to engage in a calculated effort to evade accountability. Just a very key point, If he had properly addressed this 25 years ago, then we probably wouldn't be having this conversation now. Who knows if his ministry would have survived? So I think that it's generally been accepted that what he did is he calculatingly avoided accountability through these fake Matthew 18, meetings. He claimed, and do not lose sight of the fact that he claimed that he had a Matthew 18 meeting with Sarah Monk, the 20-year-old at the time. Sarah Monk disputes that. She says, no. When we met, we discussed the other relationship he was having with the married woman because Sarah had found something in his drawer, which we'll get to. So there wasn't even an attempt to necessarily resolve whatever he was doing wrong with Sarah Monk. There was apparently this meeting with him, his wife, the married woman, and the married woman's husband. And then they all agreed, I believe, to basically, keep it amongst themselves. They all, quote unquote, repented. But again, the point that gets lost is the dynamic. This woman and her husband were not in a position of spiritual authority. Michael Brown was, and he abused that authority. Even though they're both consenting adults, only one of them is in the position that has the authority, and that's Dr. Brown. So she's certainly responsible for her own actions, whatever they may have been at the time, but he's held to a higher standard, according to the Bible. So, and it seems like he's trying to play this off like, oh, well, like we both made mistakes, but we met about it and agreed that we would like repent and not continue that. And we asked forgiveness from our spouses. And that's all good and fine if they were just two peers in a church, but they weren't. They were somebody who was a leader in the church and somebody who was, more of on the level of a congregant, if you will, or somebody who was following Dr. Brown's ministry. That's a completely different dynamic. Such behavior in any form is entirely unacceptable in any setting, but particularly within church and ministry settings, wrote Jim Holler, Firefly's investigator. Michael Brown, 70, is the founder of the Concord, North Carolina-based ministry, The Line of Fire, and formerly asked Dr. Brown. He also led the Brownsville Revival School of Ministry and founded the Fire School of Ministry. Brown has taught thousands of students who went on to lead ministries affecting tens of millions of people, Firefly reported. Brown did not immediately respond to the Reuters report request for comment. Monk told the Reuters report she's still processing the report, but was initially struck by how misleading Brown could be. She said, if Mike can cover up his own sexual abuse and misconduct with me, he can cover it for other ministries. Very good point. And that's what I think that, this provides an interesting glimpse or insight into some of the things that concerned us in discernment ministries about how reflexively defensive he was of things that should have been indefensible. Reuters report reported allegations of sexual misconduct last December. The Line of Fire board hired Firefly's investigator Jim Holler to investigate. Holler told the Reuters report he released a report to the Line of Fire board last Saturday. LOF published Firefly's report in full on its website yesterday afternoon. Firefly also found that Brown deliberately deflected questions about allegations of sexual misconduct. Once again, we're talking about covering up. This pattern of deflection appears to be a calculated effort to evade accountability, suppress the allegations, protect his ministry's reputation. And that's pretty much what we see here, is trying to scramble. And we're seeing it. We've been seeing it for the last couple of months. He's back on Facebook. He was supposed to be taking a sabbatical until this report came out. And instead, what we've seen now for the last month and a half is he's not writing articles, but he's back on Facebook and he's posting, scripture. And so he's basically trying to kind of slink back in to the public eye. He also released his latest book, so claimed it was divine timing. Firefly report confirms Roy's report reporting on the allegations that Brown swatted his secretary's butt, kissed her, held her hand, allowed her to sit on his lap. Firefly also confirmed TR's reporting that Brown engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a now deceased married congregant from a church he pastored during the Brownsville Revival. This relationship included sexually related communication, the report stated. And these actions not only betray the confidence placed in these roles, but also inflict significant harm on individuals and communities, eroding the trust essential for fostering spiritual guidance and support. There's a picture from Brown in the Brownsville Revival. Firefly interviewed Brown, who denied he kissed the former secretary, Sarah Monk, on the lips, contradicting her testimony. Brown admitted an emotional affair, adultery of the heart, with the married woman, but denied physical touching. Very important to note, again, it was escalating toward that direction. Again, the previous allegation was something on the lines of basically phone sex. For whatever reason, whether it was the woman or Brown or both, they decided to stop it. Brown was constantly going to reflect upon, listen, I didn't touch her. But again, what's being omitted is the power dynamic involved. So when you're in the position of spiritual authority over a congregant, and you're not equal. And enough with the charismaniacal cover-up buzzwords. I just had an emotional affair. I just had adultery of the heart. What exact? And this is a little disappointing that the report doesn't get into the graphic details of what this means, because that's probably a little more revealing. Was there actual phone sex? Was there actual? What level of sexual misconduct are we talking about? To kind of gloss over by calling it emotional affair or adultery of the heart is designed to cover up the severity of what was done. Brown stated they both said some sinful things to each other. That's a little vague. And that it was the most despicable thing he had ever done. Well, fine. This is consistent with Brown's previous claim to the Roy's report that the relationship had an emotional, not a physical tie. Again, if by physical he means he did not have an affair with her, that appears to be true, but that's only because they stopped the progression of what they were doing. And one can make the argument that, if you engaged in some form of sexual gratification via phone, that is indeed kind of a physical tie. Firefly investigators conducted 88 interviews with witnesses and survivors, 14 of which were re-interviews. Firefly also reviewed 500 documents, some of which were emails from ministry leaders confronting Brown, and Brown denying the allegations. In addition to the two situations of inappropriate relationships, the report found that Brown admonished women for their revealing dress and kept strict purity and dating standards at the school. It's an important point. Brown was affectionate with multiple female students, including the couple women he wrapped his arms around. Brown invited young women on trips with him, sometimes inviting them into his hotel room just to hang out. Brown's wife, Nancy, forbid Brown's assistant, Scott Volk, from telling anyone about the close relationship Volk noticed Brown had with the married woman. In 2002, Brown accused former fire administrator Niels Pripp, who confronted Brown about Brown's hand-holding with Monk, of trying to bring Brown's ministry down. The report stated Brown's behavior could be characterized as a sexual harassment or hostile work environment. Firefly recommended better training, policies, preventive measures, and response protocols. Firefly stopped short of making any recommendations about the future of Brown's ministry with Line of Fire or elsewhere. So you can sort of smell where this is going. I'm going to assume, paint me skeptical, but I'm going to assume that Brown is going to make some form of half-hearted contrition, because he's still essentially denying some of the things that Sarah Monk is saying. And he's doing that, I think, to save his ministry. And he's developed a very loyal, sycophantic, cult-like following. Just go to his Facebook page and read the comments. He has placed himself in such a hermetically sealed bubble that, anybody who dares to say anything is branded as, divisive. And he doesn't have time for them, and they're just they're haters, and a lot of them, he admits, he just flat out deletes the comments. So the comments end up just being this gushing, you're such a fantastic person, thank God for you. So, and I think that base probably not going to leave him, because they're going to view this as being 25 years old. You see it in the comments about this stuff already. It's like, oh, why didn't they come back? Why didn't they come out back then? Because, again, if you don't understand the dynamics of sexual abuse, particularly when one person is in a position of authority, particularly when one person is in a position of spiritual authority, then you really should probably shut up, because you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, there's a reason why people don't come out and don't challenge people who are powerful and in positions of a direct authority over them. And the woman who's married obviously had other considerations, because she had her own husband to deal with, and she had to admit to what it was that she did. So the four of them got together and agreed to shut up. But that doesn't change what Brown did. Also, Firefly found no credible allegations of sexual misconduct after 2002. And that's a fair point. Firefly also noted that many people came forward to share positive stories of Brown's ministry, leadership, integrity, and purity of his heart in support of Brown. No question, I'm sure. If nothing indeed happened from 2002 to 2025, and he's been, basically clean for 23 years. I mean, I guess you give him credit for that. I mean, that's fine, but it doesn't really matter because he was disqualified in 2002. He shouldn't have had the ministry he had for the last 23 years, which includes, by the way, all of the power and prestige and money that he has generated from this ministry that was disqualified 23 years ago. The Line of Fire Board hasn't released a statement to accompany the report. Board spokesperson John Bernice emailed the Roy's report that Line of Fire's accountability team intends to respond next week. So I look forward to that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they basically whitewash it. Line of Fire previously stated that it has assembled an outside team of elders and leaders, including one trauma-informed counselor, to figure out a plan when the investigation is complete. Their names will be released next week. It's worth noting that the team of elders and leaders, whoever they may be, are going to probably be people who are part of the machine and such, are going to try to figure out ways to, basically sweep this under the rug and get Brown back out there generating money for the machine. And if you think that's hyperbolic, there was a similar team of elders and leaders that reviewed the Firefly report on Bicklegate, and their recommendations were atrocious. They said that the people that facilitated Mike Bickle only had to take a 2-year break from ministry and then go right back in to abusing people, and that even Mike Bickle could return to some form of informal ministry. And I said at the time, like, what ministry do you envision Mike Bickle being able to return to? And would you send your daughter to that ministry? At what point during the 50 years do you think Mike Bickle was saved? When he was sleeping with the 13-year-old, or with the 14-year-old? Or when he seduced the daughter of a family friend who was 19 years old and had a 4-year relationship with her? Or when he lied about the prophetic founding of IHOP, created the demonic 24/7 prayer book? Exactly when he allowed the 16 other members to go ahead and sexually abuse other people. When he passed off a woman who was married to one of his ministry teachers that he was having an affair with, and he passed her off to his son to have an affair with. At what point do you think this man was saved? Now, in fairness, Dr. Brown is not Mike Bickle. Dr. Brown appears to have had some very bad lapses in judgment 23 years ago. And I mean, I have no problem giving him credit if the report's true and he's been clean of such for the last 23 years. Maybe these were the incidences that prompted him to basically, reassert his devotion to his wife and the vows of his marriage, and credit to Nancy for forgiving. All of that counts. I'm not saying it doesn't. The point being is that he built a ministry based upon something he was not doing. And those offenses disqualify him from ministry according to the Bible. And he knows this. So that's the report. So that's the Roy's report. So quickly on the report, just a couple of things. So it does start out with the strict policies of the fire school. So through our findings, the purity culture within the organization discouraged any dating in the first semester, visiting opposites gender housing. So you couldn't go to any place where somebody of the opposite sex lived, even though Brown himself would bring what they refer to as a harem of young women with him on trips and invite them into his hotel room. So sometimes without his wife, by the way. Any form of physical relationship, strict dress codes were enforced, especially regarding length of women's tops and skirts. Violation of these policies would result in severe consequences, including expulsion. These rules are intended to maintain a high standard of moral conduct and ensure the students remain focused on their spiritual and academic growth while he was swatting a 19-year-old on a butt having phone sex with a married woman. Right. The administration believed that by enforcing strict guidelines, they could create an environment that was conducive to personal development and spiritual maturity. So, let's see here. So, witness 27, Melissa McGavin, recalled her time as a student at an incident where Brown addressed a class in the Orange Room, the largest classroom and sanctuary on the campus. During the session, Brown rebuked the entire class, stating that a student had confessed to having sexual relations with another student in her class, and in 1998 was subsequently expelled from school. They recounted instances where Brown preached from the pulpit about the types of underwear women should wear, claiming that choosing thong panties was a reflection of a hidden intention that could lead their brother to stumble. Additionally, she remembered Brown admonishing women for wearing perfume, accusing them of attempting to lure their brothers into sin. Despite the strict policies prohibiting any appearance of impropriety on or off campus, McGavin recalled that Brown would walk alongside her, wrapping his arm around her and pulling her close to his side. So, and you may say, well, what does that have to do with anything? This is part of the entire point. So, women were forbidden from wearing blouses with necklines lower than 3 fingers from the base of the neck, no open-toed shoes because they were labeled as immodest. Even if you believe such ridiculous stuff and that you don't want to actually hold men accountable for how they react to things, that everything has to be the Jezebel spirit, luring. Even if you buy that nonsense, okay, in his life, he was doing the opposite. That's the point, is he built his ministry upon this fake holiness. By the way, the same thing that Mike Bickle did, the same thing that Ravi Zacharias did, it's same thing that Ted Haggard did. Ted Haggard, who was the former head of the National Association of Evangelicals, would rail for hours and hours from his pulpit, where he had 14,000 members, about the sins of homosexuality while he was having an affair for 20 years with a male prostitute who we like to do crystal meth with. So maybe, just spitballing here, it should matter that when you build your ministry and your reputation, that has led to, I don't even know how much money Dr. Brown is worth at this point, but it's all based on hypocrisy and it's all based on lies. And you've done nothing over the 23 years to actually help the people that you hurt. And instead, your job is to cover up when this stuff first broke, Brown sent out a fundraising email claiming he was being attacked by Satan. But this is all an elaborate scheme to bring down his ministry. Come on. Second point. This is about the married woman. The husband stated in late January or early February 2002 he became aware of an inappropriate relationship between his wife and Brown. He confronted Brown in his office with Nancy Brown present. According to him, Brown admitted to the inappropriate relationship during this meeting. Shortly afterward, he stated that one of Brown's senior staff members called him and asked, "I just want to know one thing, did anything happen?" According to the staff member, was referring to whether Brown and the wife had a physical encounter. I responded no. The staff member indicated that that was all he wanted to know. I briefly mentioned this before. It is disappointing for this report that this is glossed over and that there's no detail. Having an inappropriate relationship, what does that mean? Because it's designed to sanitize it, to basically make you go, okay, well, the spectrum that comes into people's minds when you consider inappropriate relationship, right up to the point of, but not including a physical affair. That's a pretty wide gamut. And based upon previous reporting and previous statements, I believe, from the husband, if I remember correctly, who basically accused Brown of having phone sex with his wife, I think it's a little disingenuous to label it just as an inappropriate relationship. In an email response from Brown to Ron Cantor, I did not have an affair, but we developed a very unhealthy and sinful soul tie. What the hell does that mean? So, because a sinful soul tie to me, listen, I think we're dancing around what we know was going on. Is the two consenting adults, one of which in a position of spiritual authority, engaged in kind of the activity that normally would lead to like an affair. They, probably started talking inappropriately about sexual related issues, and then eventually that graduated to some form of sexual gratification through what's been reported as phone sex. And then at some point, one or both, decided, hey, you know what? This is going in a direction that I don't want to end up in. And they ended it. And actually, they met because they don't understand Matthew 18. They met the four of them, the husband, wife, and Brown and Nancy, and agreed to kind of like, bury this because neither Brown nor the wife probably wanted the public attention that would accompany essentially an affair of somebody of that stature. But again, the dynamic missing there is Matthew 18 has nothing to do with when a spiritual leader abuses his position of authority. And that's what this was. All right. So going on to victim number 2, Sarah. According to Sarah, the butt swatting and quick kisses became a common event when she went into Brown's office to say goodbye. The behavior described as deeply inappropriate and unprofessional, crosses boundaries of respect and decency, especially in a setting where trust and professionalism should be paramount. These actions did not just occur in the office, but also while in his house with his wife, Nancy Brown, and other students. When at his house, Sarah advised Brown that when at his house, Sarah advised Brown would be in his home office and engage in the same inappropriate behavior. Such actions create an uncomfortable and unsafe environment. While house sitting for Brown in 2002, Sarah discovered a yellow pad of paper inside a nightstand that appeared to detail an inappropriate relationship involving the married woman. Its contents suggested fantasies about sexual relationship between Brown and the married woman. Brown stated that the document was not a journal, but a piece of paper he had written down notes from a conversation with the married woman. So, I thought about this today. This could very easily have been a further attempt at grooming. Okay, you would think that if somebody of Brown's stature and intelligence, quite frankly, knew that he was engaging in an inappropriate sexual relationship with a married woman, that could destroy his entire ministry and destroy the illusion of the great holiness preacher. That included detailed sexual fantasies about the married woman. Why in the world would you leave that in an unlocked drawer when you knew you'd be letting this 19-year-old, 20-year-old house sit for you for, I'm assuming he was on vacation. I mean, you don't house sit for a day. So, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't seem to indicate that she was like snooping. So, it appears to me that the going through of the, was it a cabinet? Where did she discover it? In like a nightstand, would be normally expected and allowed. It just strikes me as a clever grooming trick to basically get the conversation with Sarah to swing to the sexual side. Because all the other stuff is just kind of this cursory kissing on the lips and smacking on the butt. But there's no actual grooming discussion. And the only way that works is if you eventually start having the inappropriate discussions that Brown was having with the married woman, right? So what better way than to have her discover, this other inappropriate sexual relationship that he's having with a married woman, to broach those types of subjects with Sarah. Now, of course, it didn't work because Sarah revolted against this and actually confronted him about it. At which point, this whole narrative that, she found me out. I find it difficult to believe that somebody as smart as Brown would leave such a incriminating piece of evidence about a different relationship just like hanging out in a drawer, and then letting this girl stay there to watch his house and expect her to not find it somehow. I don't know. I just find that very convenient and very much in line with typical type of grooming activities. Either way, Sarah eventually had enough, and she cut it off. So that, again, this story gives me no joy. I mean, I'm going to probably do a piece soon about I'm hearing that several ridiculously false teachers like Kenneth Copeland visited Donald Trump for Easter dinner. That's a story that gives me a little bit of joy because it's just amusing that the apostate church seems to have no problem with the absolute wolves that are surrounding their idol, but this story doesn't. When I first went on Dr. Brown's show, it was after he had appeared on Benny Hinn's show for a week. And I was very troubled. And I wanted to express to him that, he was lending his credibility to somebody who didn't deserve it. And I mean, that exchange was pleasant enough. But I found a lot of Brown's answers to be kind of deflecting and kind of unbelievably naive, like claiming he didn't know any of the rumors about Benny Hinn. I'm like, my cat knew about the rumors about Benny Hinn. So I found, that's when I first started to worry about the disingenuousness of Dr. Brown. And then the second time I went on was after I had done a devotional where I referred to him as a gatekeeper for the NAR. Apparently he took great offense. But he kind of suckered me, and, I want to have you back on the show. And, so I went back on and he basically mugged me. I mean, it was just, he spoke over me, yelled over me, threatened me with hell. He played his usual game of trying to set the definition of what a false teacher was as being somebody who's, basically hellbound, and then saying, I refuse to commit anybody to hell, but you do. And I'm like, no, those are your words. You don't get to put things in my mouth. And then as time went on, the thing with Jennifer Claire really bothered me. Because it's such low-hanging fruit. It should be easy for Dr. Brown to be able to say, there's no such thing as a sneaky squid spirit. And then as the years progressed, he became, once Trump came down the elevator, a lot of people don't realize this, but Dr. Brown was and has been, a MAGA NAR dominionist. He's just more careful about it. He's not as stupid as Mario Murillo or Jack Hibbs. He plays both sides. He offers up some criticism so that when people correctly point out that he's a dominionist, you go, oh, no, what about these articles? But the reality is, he said before the election, essentially, he said, there's no reason, he could find no reason why Christians should vote Democratic. Not as severe as somebody like Murillo or Greg Locke, who said that you'd be going to hell if you did, or Jack Hibbs, who said you'd be going to hell if you didn't even vote at all for anybody. So, the progression of Dr. Brown from 2016 to today was, one of just somebody who wasn't, finishing his race very strong. And maybe I had a view of him initially that wasn't based in reality. Maybe he wasn't, didn't deserve the credit that I gave him. Doesn't matter now. What matters now is he's been exposed. This report really didn't reveal anything that we kind of didn't already know, but it makes it official, right? Because initially the reaction from the Brown camp was denial. And essentially, what I think is going to happen next week is the Line of Fire group and Dr. Brown himself is going to come out and they're going to claim some vindication from this report, even though it vindicates absolutely nothing. He's going to claim this was all 25 years ago. He dealt with it through Matthew 18. He followed the Bible. Him and Sarah, they just have a disagreement about some of the specific details. He's going to blame that on time. He's going to say, it was 23 years ago. She's probably misremembering. It's going to come down to a he said, she said. He's going to be contrite. He's going to beg forgiveness from the husband and from Sarah. He's going to own as much of this as he can without losing his ministry. But he's not going to hold himself to biblical standards. He's not going to hold himself to biblical accountability. Michael Brown built his ministry that he enjoys today, and all of the money that comes with it, and the prestige, and flights all over the country and preaching it. He owns all of that to this period of time when he built his ministry upon a holiness preaching that he did not adhere to, and permanently damaged at least 3 individuals, because I count the husband. It's sad that the married woman has passed on, but her memory should not be defiled by glossing over this as inappropriate soul ties, or, he even admits it was the most despicable thing he ever did in his life. So, I mean, that's pretty self-damning. I'll give him credit for that. But there should be no reality after this report when Michael Brown comes back to his ministry. None. On what moral basis could he ever stand again? Remember, this was somebody who branded himself the voice of spiritual clarity and moral something or another. This is what he told us for the last 23 years. I know better about the morality of the church and the morality of the country and what direction we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to be doing. But he built it all upon the bones of these 2 women who deserve more than this kind of glossing over of his behavior. Now, it's nowhere near what Michael did. Let's be clear. I mean, Brown is 100% correct. There is nothing physical, sexually physical, with either of these 2 women. But the reason why there isn't is because of the 2 women. Sarah put a stop to it. It seems to me there's a chance that this mysterious, hand scribblings about the sexual fantasies with the married one was left for Sarah to find. And I think Brown was hoping that would maybe generate some kind of a, next step in the grooming process of Sarah. Instead, he got pushback from Sarah and he immediately retreated. And then that's when, he claims to have had a Matthew 18 meeting, which Sarah says never happened about them. He said it was about the affair. And sure, the married woman, the married man, met with him and Nancy, and they all agreed they don't really want the public attention. I'm sure Dr. Brown didn't, because it would have destroyed his ministry. But the woman didn't want it either. I'm sure the husband didn't want it either. But I don't want anybody to lose sight of the fact that they were not peers in the church who just had an affair, or even a emotional soul tie, whatever nonsense Brown said. They weren't peers. One of them was in a position of spiritual authority, and the other was not. And that's an abuse by definition. This is what it means when the Bible says that those who labor in teaching and preaching are held to a higher standard. If you're in leadership in the church, you're held to a higher standard over the people you lead, which, by the way, is not just the church. That's how it is in the world, too. If you're in leadership at your company, there's a reason why you're not allowed to date your subordinates. At least I hope you're not. Because one of you is in a position of authority over the other. To me, it's only compounded by the spiritual aspect of it. You're in a position of trying to be responsible for their spiritual growth, and you're having phone sex with them. You're being responsible for their spiritual growth, and you're, telling them they're not allowed to wear necklines lower than 3 fingers while you're swatting them on the butt and kissing them on the lips. Come on. I mean, was it as bad as many of the other leaders? No, but it's bad enough. Michael Brown is disqualified, and he knows it. So let's just wait till next week, and we're going to see. I hope I'm wrong, but I get the feeling they're going to try to spin this to say, yeah, nothing to see here. 23 years ago, move on. And why do I feel that? Because they've done nothing but try to cover it up for 23 years, and specifically since the charges were laid out. Go listen to Joel Richardson's release of the audio exchanges he had with Dr. Brown, because that's somebody who clearly finally got it and basically was like, if you had done this to like my daughter, I would have laid you out. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Test everything and hold fast.